Why hello you amazing beautiful people, and welcome back to another AniNews ReZero reaction video. So freaking AniNews is back and at it again, and honestly I think we're all here for it. AniNews has uploaded a brand new video for some ReZero Season 3 cut content. Pretty much all of you have been spamming me to react to this one. Of course we're going to check it out, and it is Regulus's OP powers explained and how Subaru beat it. And honestly I'm actually kind of curious about this because the fight was as much of a physical fight as it was a mental one. So understanding the workings behind Subaru's mind, how he figured out all of this, what was going through his head, actually going to be really interesting. So let's do that. Press that like button, press that subscribe button, unless you're into my first time ever reaction. Also, by the way, shout out AniNews. Link to AniNews' channel is in the freaking description. Unless you're into my first time ever reaction to AniNews' ReZero Season 3 cut content.
Of Regulus's power is being able to press pause in the middle of a video game. This was what Subaru said to Regulus the moment he figured it out, and as accurate as it was to describe it like that, Regulus had no idea what any of it meant.
That's a good point.
Subaru would then call
That's a good point. That's true.
it Lionheart instead, which, put simply, lets him stop time for his physical body. It was a conclusion that stemmed from the connection between the Archbishop's names and the names of the stars that Subaru knew. Such a fact wasn't something Subaru was a fan of though, since with the name derived from the stars himself, he had always considered the stars kind of like siblings. So, for the most wretched people he'd met to share that same lineage, well, that to him was the ultimate humiliation. It made him furious at whoever decided to name them that way. Now, we already know the word base.
That I don't understand. So, he was angry because the evil people are named after the stars, and the stars are considered siblings, so he's angry about that? Okay. Subaru needs to chill a little bit. I don't know why any normal person would give a fuck about that.
Path Subaru followed to figure out Regulus's power, but the steps before were just as important too. With every plan serving as a different means to figuring out his invincibility, eventually Subaru would learn it wasn't invincibility at all. If it was, then him and Reinhardt would have been able to see through it by now. So, it was after that rigorous process of ruling out various possibilities, combined with Amelia's recollection and Subaru's connection to Lionheart, that only one answer would be left to explain all of it. All the patterns Regulus exhibited dictated his powers didn't make him invincible at all. No. What Regulus was doing—
Oh, is it more that Subaru has an attachment to him because of his name? Is that why Subaru's annoyed? Not because of his attachment to the other ones, but his attachment to himself.
Would be classified as a time stop ability. More specifically, his ability allowed him to stop time for all sorts of objects.
Oh, gotta let the dog out. There we go. For those of you who don't know, sometimes he just sleeps under my desk when I'm recording videos. There you go. Sometimes he's there.
This was an answer that seemed so much more obvious the more Subaru thought about it, since when he looked back at the twisted worldview Regulus abided by, the way he lived was clearly a testament to the obscene power gifted to him. Then, with time preventing the change of an object's state, it explained how he could be in water and not get wet, or how he could throw dirt and rocks that would penetrate anything. Removing time as a property they were affected by essentially turned—
Wait, how does throwing dirt and rocks that can penetrate anything have anything to do with time? That part I don't get.
them into anomalies in space which could pass through anything. So,
it's crazy
Subaru
in that
would
shot that she
go
actually
on to
smiles.
describe it as something akin to a vacuum slash ability, since with Regulus effectively being this distortion in space, that would allow him or anything he touches to bypass everything. It didn't matter how strong or durable it was. An object with its time stopped was nothing more than a vacuum to an object with time. It would pass straight through it as if it wasn't even there. To explain this with a practical example we saw in the anime, let's use Krush as our test dummy. Here we saw that Regulus didn't even need dirt. While that is one of the more common projectiles he uses, by simply moving, he's affecting the air around him, so say he applies his time stop to some of the air he's displacing, that would make it a projectile no different than the dirt. Whether it's with the slash of his arms or even a simple blink of his eyes, if he applies time stop to the air he's displacing, that air will then hold the state it was last in and proceed forward indefinitely. So, where for a normal person waving your arm does nothing, Regulus can stop time for the air his arm displaces, have it keep the state of movement it was frozen in, then that in turn results in an unstoppable, unseeable projectile cutting through everything.
I see. So the strength part is the unusual part, but the being able to do it makes sense because the second you create that wind, that movement, you can then freeze it in that motion and use that as momentum. And I'm guessing somehow he's able to build up that momentum to a point of crazy strength. Ah, that makes a bit more sense.
For dirt
That's
and
actually
rocks,
really
and
interesting.
It was even seen applied to Reinhardt. Now, when it comes to stopping
that's how he was
time
able
for
to
his
throw him
body,
to the moon
the
as
state
well.
He was in
I
pre-time
see.
stop is the state he'll be in after.
This
That
actually
being
makes
the
so
case,
much sense.
It doesn't matter how much wear and tear he takes in between.
And
Whatever
he did take a
state
lot.
he initiated it in is the same state he'll come out in after. It was truly the ultimate ability in terms of both offense and defense.
Does he need to personally switch it on? Is that not a bit dangerous? Couldn't that mean that you could sneak up on him and give him a slap? Or is it just always on?
With its applications seemingly endless, you
The
know
most
it's OP
swagger
when
walk ever.
invincibility is just a mere side effect of it. So,
Invincibility
Subaru
is a
pinpointing this
side
head for the
effect.
first time left Regulus shocked, but it didn't last long as his focus quickly shifted to hunting down Subaru. Now that Subaru understood the fundamentals of Regulus's power though,
It's actually insane that Subaru didn't just explode when you consider that he's fighting one of the strongest fucking characters in the ReZero universe, and he's just one of the weakest in the ReZero universe.
could easily navigate the chase in a way that actually manipulated Regulus. You see, with Regulus being the novice he was, a simple taunt was all it took to make him engage head-on. Subaru had cleverly placed himself behind a hole though, so the moment Regulus's footing reached said hole, he would instantly fall without a means to save himself. Had it been a pitfall or some type of covered trap, then Regulus would have just used time stop to create a foothold out of it. It's because there was nothing around him other than air though that Regulus would simply fall without being able to stop it. He would have to reach the bottom before he could do anything to make his way out. Subaru would then mock Regulus and flip him off, keeping him occupied as the lesser spirit Amelia gave him continued digging out more holes in the ground. Subaru kept mental marks of where each of them were, but for Regulus, who was totally unfocused, navigating the terrain wasn't so easy anymore. He would be much more cautious than he was before. This in turn allowed
it was the
Subaru
lesser
to stall
spirit
for
going
time
around
as long as he wanted,
Minecraft
since
in
he could
his
easily
freaking
dig as
street
many
up.
holes as he needed, and Regulus would remain trapped by what was nothing more than undisguised pitfalls. It
Was the water part of the plan then? He said he could keep digging as many holes as he wanted. Was the water always part of the plan, or was it just like a nice side effect
was
to
clear
it?
proof Regulus's experience was lacking. He had likely only ever crushed his enemies in a head-on battle, so when confronted with something a bit more prolonged, this was completely new territory for him. It was such an easy workaround that Subaru almost felt bad for Regulus. He felt taking advantage of someone so unskilled was actually making him a worse person. That's actually the reason.
So is the idea that Subaru was actually still able to the idea behind Subaru is actually able to stay alive in this situation is because Regulus is just so novice in his skills. And because it'd be like me inheriting these powers. I'm not going to suddenly be able to use them to their best ability. I don't know what I'm doing, right? So if I'm fighting someone, even if they're basic, they might be able to dodge a lot of my attacks. Is that the thing? My only argument against that would be, isn't Regulus super freaking old? You would assume that at this point he would be alright with his abilities.
And he wanted Amelia to leave, since with her being such an honest person, Subaru felt this roundabout way of fighting wouldn't suit her. That said, the only weak point in a strategy like this was that the length in which it could go on for depended entirely on Subaru's stamina. Luckily, his bad leg wasn't really hurting, so Subaru knew he could keep going for a while.
Man, his
It
leg
was
is
as if it
freaky.
was in peak form right now. A moment later, Regulus would throw a tantrum befitting his persona, destroying the entire ground and every hole along with it. Subaru would mock Regulus again to prevent him from thinking he'd come out with a victory, then create more distance in a classic display of kiting. As a gamer who knew exactly how to take on powerful bosses like this, Subaru was applying his knowledge
nice
of kiting
touch.
in the best way he could. It was the most he'd ever had to use knowledge from his old world. So, this cycle of mocking and kiting would continue endlessly, all while Subaru would avoid both the shelters and Amelia. In fact, there were actually quite a lot of things he was trying to do at once. Not only was he keeping Regulus pinned to one area,
Every time I see anything from Elden Ring, I immediately want to just play Elden Ring.
he was also ensuring Amelia had the time she needed, all while avoiding battle in the places where the shelters were. Combine that with trying to keep himself safe too, and what you get is a task that required all his focus.
Yeah.
Ultimately, what it all came down to was stalling, and that was the role Subaru
slips up
committed
even a
himself
second,
to
forgets
fulfilling.
one movement, goes down the
In
wrong
meantime,
street, he could end up
Amelia
just
would be
accidentally
dealing
killing
with the
a
wives,
bunch of
but
people.
for him, he needed to avoid this city-destroying calamity. Like, with Regulus going through what was essentially a temper tantrum, should Subaru venture to a part of the city they had not been to yet, Regulus would be sure to level it shortly after. Buildings would crumble and foundations shatter, all in pursuit of him.
And you're immediately then putting civilians
keep running
at
and
risk.
taunting regardless, all because this was the only way to fight Regulus. It was after about 15 minutes that Subaru would finally wind up here, giving Regulus the chance to gloat again. As it was with every battle he fought before, Regulus knew it was always fated to end up like this. He would then call Subaru greedy for wishing for something beyond his ability, then reaffirm his own value of excessive avarice leading to ultimate tragedy. As the embodiment of greed himself, he truly thought lack of desire was the most precious thing that any person could have. This obviously wasn't the way he himself lived, but
A lack of desire is the most precious thing anyone can have. It's ironic coming from him how he literally seems to want everything, which, you know, makes sense, right? But he does literally everything, and including like emotions and people and literally everything. The idea of not wanting a single thing he thinks is the most precious thing in the world. There's something weirdly like nice about that. Actually, when you really deep it, that's actually like kind of nice.
he certainly went to great efforts to enforce it onto others. So, as he genuinely pitied Subaru for his grave mistake, he would convey one last time the message that one should be content within themselves. To him, a man's reach should never extend further than his grasp. Regulus would then ask of Amelia's whereabouts, reveal his bride's connections to his authority, then speak of how entrusting them with his heart was the ultimate expression of love for them. This was, as we saw, part of Subaru's bait to get Regulus to Monologue, so that in turn would lead to more predictable attacks from him. He would charge forward with a burst of speed not typical to what he displayed before, showing power which stemmed from freezing time on himself. You see, by preventing all physical phenomena from interacting with him, Regulus was free from the forces of gravity, air resistance, and every aspect of the conservation of momentum.
Makes sense. If he literally... So the idea of his time freeze is he just takes himself out of the universe. He's like a ghost at that point. That's kind of how his time freeze works. Not like a Bernard's watch scenario where you're still part of everything that's going around you.
This translated to incredible speed and power, but also made it so he could only attack in one direction. Whichever direction he committed to when time was stopped is the same direction he would continue until it wasn't. So, in the hands of someone more skilled, this would certainly be deadly, but for someone like Regulus, he could barely control it at all. It made dodging his attacks extremely easy. So much so that Subaru could continue his chase even longer now.
Yeah, because his movements aren't going to be crazy fast when he's initiating these attacks. And on top of that, if he just goes like this, you know the attack is going that way. So you can just jump out of the way. Makes sense.
Eventually, Subaru would see the pillar of ice forming in the distance, symbolizing the choice he himself knew he'd never be able to make. Even if he knew killing the wives was the only way to kill Regulus, actually doing so wasn't something Subaru felt he could follow through with.
Yeah, she didn't really kill them,
to see what he could only assume was Amelia doing just that, well, that was something he truly felt would have been unimaginable for her.
Wait, when he saw that pillar, did he think they were dead, not frozen? Or did he think they were frozen, but he somehow sees that as dead?
Now, it was when even that didn't work that, aside from the numerous contradictions Regulus would spew by calling Amelia a mass murderer, Subaru would also review where he might have gone wrong. After entangling so closely with Regulus for the past 12 minutes, he felt he had pretty good insight into his intelligence and vocabulary now. So,
Subaru really
it's because of that Subaru knew Regulus didn't have it in him to trick others like the way it
seemed.
Such
a weak character,
he knew Regulus wasn't capable of bluffing about his powers like that. With the limits of his understanding only extending as far as himself, the understanding of others required to effectively deceive simply wasn't within his capabilities. It's for that reason this whole turn of events was so confusing. Greed's authority should have been figured out for sure now. Turns out there was one wife left, and though the ceremony was never formalized, it was apparent that marriage was just a formality. You see, So long as Regulus considered someone his wife, they would be inducted into his little kingdom regardless of consent.
Okay.
This meant that despite
That's a little bit fucked up, bro. I'm not gonna lie. That's a little bit fucked
all
up.
Regulus had said about her, Amelia was still someone he considered his. And now that
Weird
all his
dude.
other wives were gone, Regulus insisted she remain until he found some new wives. To him, it was her responsibility to fill that gap now.
Okay.
When the only option left was for Amelia to die herself, this was a choice Subaru could never make. He could certainly convince himself sacrificing all the other wives was necessary, but
Yeah,
never
fuck
when it
all of
came
them.
to Amelia.
But not Amelia.
It was a selfish
Yeah, we can
truth
kill all those ones. We don't
Subaru
care
was
about
more
them.
than aware of. It's not like that's something that we can fault him for, though, since
That's the awesome thing about Subaru. That's what makes him such an incredible main character, is the fact that he is normal. He is flawed. He isn't some, like, amazing, overpowered protagonist. He struggles in his fights. He's one of the weaker characters. Everything's uphill for him. He's having to use his intelligence, and he's getting more intelligent as the anime goes on, because that's his best weapon here, and, like, his intelligence of his own world and how things work and using those similarities. But on top of that, even he knows he's selfish, and even he knows it's a dark thought to say, yeah, sacrifice the wives, but not Amelia. And even he knows that's wrong. And that's what makes him so brilliant, is because he's not some perfect knight in shining armor.
since it was only natural that those closest to him would be the most precious. Just like everyone else, Subaru didn't value all lives equally. Amelia was, however, capable of making that choice herself, but with Subaru determined to prevent her from doing so, the only option left after was defeat. With no other means of changing the situation, Regulus would be the only person left with control here. So, after seeing that victory was his for the taking, Regulus would accept Amelia as his temporary wife, then state his intent to kill Subaru as punishment. Any person who infringed on his rights as much as he did, well, let's just say Regulus wasn't a fan of them.
No.
Now, Amelia
No.
channeling her mana here was her prepping to end things
Amazing.
herself, up until Subaru would reveal his own intentions. Regulus would just stand there and let it happen, since to him victory was 100% certain now. He knew Subaru had no paths left available to him, so this was
It's so cool when you think Regulus is so damn confident that in his eyes he's already won, so he doesn't really care what anyone tries to do. He'll just stand there. He'll be like, yeah, go ahead. Yeah, try. All right, is that cannon going to work on me? Cool, yeah. Oh, you brought those machine guns? Yeah, go for it, man. Cool. Yeah, I got some time to kill. I'm going to go get like a jumbo juice or something. I'll be right back. Give me 5 minutes.
just an extra show adding to his sense of satisfaction. It was when Subaru unveiled his unseen
Ooh.
hand next that
noise,
a voice
man.
without sound could be felt cheering from within. As much as he hated the idea that Betelgeuse was somehow living inside him, there was without a doubt an incomprehensible mixture of emotions not his own. It was as if the power itself was cheering for being awakened, like a deep desire to be wanted was just fulfilled. Subaru knew these emotions weren't his own, so the only other facet which could explain it was the witch factor.
Yeah.
He believed it was expressing gratitude for being called to service again. Now, activating it was something he'd done a few times before, but actually controlling it was entirely different. This and navigating Amelia's heart were two things he'd never done before. Combine this with the fact any mistake could prove fatal, and
Amelia actually looks like younger in the manga, it seems. Like there, she looks very
Subaru
different.
knew this was a gamble more stacked against him. Either way, he still wanted to see if it could be used to save lives regardless. As a power previously used to take lives, Subaru was now seeing firsthand whether its applications were truly limited to that. That's when Amelia would say she trusts both of them, certainly confusing Subaru as to who else she might have been talking about, but also instilling confidence since she spoke as if she was certain the hand would never harm her. So, one squeeze was all it took for Regulus' heart to
weird.
be removed, leaving him vulnerable to every attack now. Much of this satisfying sequence was exactly as we saw in the anime, but to give reason to Regulus' begging here, it was simply because he couldn't fathom trying to win without first having a significant advantage. As soon as things started looking a little tough for him, Subaru knew Regulus was the type to give up without first exploring what other options were available to him.
Yeah, because he's
That being
never
the
had
case,
that before,
for
had
him
he?
to beg for a 1v1 here, all this was him trying to reclaim some sort of advantage. It was a truly pathetic sight considering he still possessed one of the most powerful abilities in the world. Fast forward to when Reinhardt returned for the cleanup, and Regulus' inner
look
thoughts
who it
during his
is.
airtime went on much longer than what we saw in the anime. First, he would go into his past, describing the family he detested, then talking about how he killed them, gaining his witch back.
This is actually one of my pet peeves in anime. It is these giant random monologues. I don't like them. And I know a lot of people do. In the anime world, loads of people really like these. These, I just don't like. I don't like them. And I think the main reason behind that is because a lot of these random monologues are repetitive statements. So you will ask a question over and over again in different ways. You know, how are these people beating me? Who do these people think they are? I don't, like, these people shouldn't be able to beat me. I'm this person. Am I not this person? Of course I'm this person. And they are those people. So how are those people able to defeat this person? And it's like that. And all of it is just empty. None of it means anything. There's no substance to the words. And that will just fucking go on for ages. And that is why I'm never a big fan of these monologues. When these monologues are done well, they can be brilliant, but I've never seen one done that
Factor granted him powers he didn't
so
have
this,
before.
I'm glad
first
the
he
anime
used it to
didn't.
kill
Look
his
at this
family,
shit!
Then he
I'm
used
so
it to
glad the
kill
anime didn't
village
do this,
that looked
man.
at him with contempt.
It goes on for
Then
fucking
he used
ever!
it to
It's
kill
still
everyone
going!
in the town, which forced him to live such a worthless life. Then he used it to destroy the country, which allowed such towns and villages to exist. It was once all that was done almost a century ago that finally he was able to discover a way of life that best suit him. Fast forward through all that stuff about his wives, and finally we get to the part where he talks about how life was meaningless to him. Romance and love and friendship and trust were all ideals Regulus deemed as pointless. To him, love couldn't
This shit is still going on, bro. It's still going on.
save anyone, and the idea of
I'm reading as
understanding
much
one
as I
another
can
was
as well,
just
and
an illusion.
yeah, it's just his
So,
story.
with
but
life being
AniNews
this
is
silly
telling us
balancing
anyway.
act of consideration and compromise, Regulus to the very end truly believed in the logic he abided by. And though the anime has him repeating "it's not my fault," in the novel it's actually him repeating "I'm not wrong." Despite everyone else working to prove him otherwise, Regulus still refused to see things any other way than his own. It was after that Regulus would surprisingly plan his counterattack, since though he seemed rather defeated, his humiliation fueled his motivations to get back at them. This led to a plan which would decimate the city in its entirety, since the moment he would start descending, the dirt in his hand could be used as a projectile to wipe out everything. All he needed to do was cast Lionheart for a brief second, then everything below him would be hit with unstoppable projectiles of mass destruction. Fortunately, Reinhardt was there to ride him like a surfboard, sending him plummeting to the earth like a meteor. The depth at which Regulus ended up wasn't due to Reinhardt's power though, but was rather simply the byproduct of using Lionheart on himself. Remember, stopping time on his body allows him to pass through anything.
He buried
So,
himself!
Had he kept time frozen for the duration of the entire fall, then Regulus would have plummeted straight through to the bottom of the earth itself. He would have descended to the unknown beyond where even the great waterfall emptied itself. Returning to
Oh, and that is why when he was falling through the hole, he wasn't initially injured. It is because he maintained this ability. Genius. That makes a lot of sense. He buried himself. He literally buried himself.
time was certainly an equally dreadful fate too, since meeting the resistance of the ground shattered literally every bone in his body. The only reason he wasn't instantly turned into a puddle was because his limbs were spread out at the moment of his entry. Instead, his body was just a pile of mush now. A mishmash of organs, bones, and blood, all in places where they shouldn't be. Somehow he was still breathing though, and through it all maintained the simple thought of, had I been serious, you wouldn't have stood a chance. It was a mindset backed by the singular goal he'd lived his entire life by.
To be honest, he's not actually wrong. Regulus against our knight in shining armor wouldn't have mattered. Like Reinhardt is still gonna win, but against Subaru and Amelia, yeah, he would have been able to take him out. There was many, but he loves hearing a monologue. And he loves giving one too. If he wasn't that cocky, he would have easily have won.
A 100-year resolve to never let anyone pity him. This led to an attempt to return to the surface, where once he was there, he was now committed to killing everyone. No longer would he make the same mistake he made before, since never again would he let anyone look down on him.
It's weird.
This was only
him.
possible if he could make it back to the surface though, and that was an arduous crawl only made possible via Lionheart. With that removing the pain for 5 seconds at a time, Regulus could inch his way back to the surface slowly but surely. Yes, his hands were mangled and fingers gone, but even then he still pushed himself forward. It was then that water would enter to finish the job, but even then, Regulus would still prolong it with Lionheart. Sure, it did relieve him of pain and any struggles he had while breathing, but when those 5 seconds were up, the fear of death came creeping ever closer. Keeping Lionheart active only increased the risk of dying from heart failure too, so in this moment where one side was drowning and the other his heart stopping, Regulus alternated between the embrace of 2 deaths. It was a fate he refused to accept no matter how near it drew.
This is actually
In the end, Regulus would have one wish only, and that was for Amelia not to feel anything at all for him. You see, he hated the idea of her rejoicing his death and starting her life anew, so his final cry was for her to simply forget him. As the one so involved with her mother's death and benefactor's transformation, Regulus wished her to feel zero fulfillment from his demise. Luckily, that's exactly what happened, since with zero memory of who he was before, it turns out Regulus left not a mark on her at all. But yeah, that's the end to the Archbishop of Greed. I hope you enjoyed learning more about what this fight had to offer, and if you want to see more, there's plenty more to come after. Every week will be another ReZero video covering the other fights. So, if you want to see the full extent of the battle for Priestella, then be sure to subscribe to see the video next week.
Awesome. All right, we're getting more. Nice. I don't know how this reaction video will do. Obviously, ReZero reaction content doesn't seem to, bring in as many as the solo leveling one. So, but hopefully you guys enjoy it, because I really love these videos equally. Shout out AniNews as well for putting together such incredible videos. Link to AniNews' channel is in the description. Kind of interesting, because at the end of it all, he simply wanted Amelia to not feel anything. Not feel happy, not feel any kind of emotions from his death, because he didn't want her to basically win in any way. That's how he was looking at it, right? And the reason I'm saying it's kind of weird is because he didn't want her to feel anything, which is exactly what happened, but that is simply because he left such a nothing impact on her life that she didn't feel anything, which in my head feels worse. Like, the idea of her having a bit of rejoice at least means that he left an impact enough in her life that she will remember, because when he dies, she has to rejoice. So in a way, that's better, right? If you piss someone off so much that when something bad finally happens that they are happy about it, at least you've made an impact. But the idea of giving something your everything and then failing and no one even caring that you failed sounds worse for me. Like, I don't know, maybe I'm crazy. But like, and he's like, he wanted that. He was like, I don't want her having the slightest bit of satisfaction. But instead, she's just not even going to know you ever existed. You were so useless, you didn't even make any kind of impact in memory. You were forgotten. And that seems worse. It's awesome actually understanding fully how Regulus' powers work and how Subaru went through like the different plans and different and how he like the different momentum changes and shifts in his idea of being able to defeat him and coming up with different ideas on the fly. And it really makes you respect Subaru a lot more as well when you consider that he is just a normal dude who's able to pull all these things off and he just gives everything his all. Like, it's hard not to just absolutely love Subaru. I really think he's one of the best and most realistic main characters in any anime. And I think what makes him so fantastic is his flaws, which for some reason people who don't like ReZero seem to use that as the reason they don't like it. For me, that's one of the reasons I do love it. I love that we're not rooting for our main character all the time. I love that there's scenes in Season 1 where I'm against Subaru. Well, I don't like how he's acting. I think he's acting childish and spoiled, and I'm cringing at him. And I'm not like 100% in his corner. And I love that we've gone through all of that, and we now have a flawed hero who we're rooting for, because it makes him very realistic. And I think this fight kind of shows you the level that Subaru is now at in terms of strength, not being on everyone else's level, but next to them in a different way, if that makes sense, with his mind. Anyway, hope you guys liked my reaction video. If you did, like, subscribe on your way out the door and all that good YouTube stuff, whatever. And as always, my friends, you right there will see me in the next video.